In a war marked by unexpected humiliations, surprising new heroes and shocking atrocities, the rumored poisoning of Roman Abramovich still remains one of the more unusual twists of the Ukraine conflict. The Russian billionaire was in Kyiv in early March to help efforts to negotiate a peace settlement with Ukrainian envoys when he started displaying symptoms. Why a man who has been shunned and sanctioned by the West for having clear connections to Vladimir Putin's regime was trying to end Putin's war is still unclear. But stranger than his abrupt transformation was the possibility that this high-powered Russian could have been the victim of an age-old Kremlin trick. Mr. Abramovich and several others who had been in the meeting suddenly experienced red, streaming eyes and peeling skin on their faces and hands, according to the Wall Street Journal. He even reportedly lost the ability to see for several hours, and the symptoms were so severe that Mr. Abramovich asked the scientist examining him, "Are we dying?" Some Western officials believe Mr. Abramovich's symptoms were simply caused by environmental factors, perhaps allergies, that triggered psychosomatic symptoms in a man familiar with Russian poison plots. But several officials and experts believe the envoys were attacked. Loading. It was not intended to, it was just a warning, Christo Grozev, an investigator with open-source investigative journalism collective Bellingcat, told Wall Street Journal. While Mr. Abramovich is reported to believe the perpetrators were Kremlin hardliners determined to stop peace talks, he may never know for sure. Russia is well practiced in the art of chemical assassinations. But divisive cocktails, incompetent assassins, and a victim who solved his own on his bed mean the plots haven't always gone to plan. Russia's history of chemical assassination plots. Moscow's penchant for poisoning its enemies dates back at least a century, to when Vladimir Ilyich Lenin was first establishing the Soviet Union. It was Lenin who ordered the creation of a secret service poisons factory, known variously as the Special Room, Scientific Research Institute No. 2, Lab X, and later the Chimera. By the 1940s, its scientists were testing out live poisons on prisoners from the gulags, experimenting to find a tasteless and odorless lethal chemical that could not be detected after. Numerous former Russian intelligence officers have detailed how the first secret police, and later the KGB and FSB, used poison to eliminate opposition figures and foreign spies. There's even a prevailing theory that Lenin himself was poisoned in a plot by his successor, Joseph Stalin. Vladimir Lenin suffered several strokes before his body now lies in the mausoleum of Lenin on Red Square. The of Stalin, like that of Lenin, was officially attributed to a stroke, but whether brought on by stress or something more sinister will perhaps forever remain a mystery. When someone's trying to assassinate you, that's pretty stressful, UCLA neurologist Harry Vinters told NBC while discussing the Lenin theory. These alleged plots extended well beyond the end of the Soviet era. In 2004, Viktor Yushchenko, who ran against Kremlin favorite Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine's presidential election, was left permanently disfigured when he was poisoned with dioxin. Former Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko was left with significant facial scarring after the poisoning. Last year, Russia was finally found responsible for the 2006 of former KGB agent Alexander Litvinenko, who after sipping a cup of green tea laced with radioactive polonium-210 from his bed, Mr. Litvinenko told detectives he believed President Vladimir Putin had directly ordered his ing, an accusation Russia has denied. Alexander Litvinenko several weeks after he was poisoned with polonium. In recent years, the weapon of choice has been Novichok, a highly toxic group of nerve agents that slow the heart, paralyze the muscles used for breathing and ultimately cause by asphyxiation. Developed by the Soviet Union in the 1970s and 80s, Novichok literally means newcomer in Russian. These nerve agents are a variation on poison gases such as VX and sarin, and are believed to be 5 to 10 times more lethal. Novichok was used in the poisoning of Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in the English cathedral city of Salisbury in 2018, as well the attack on Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny on a flight from Siberia to Moscow in 2020. In the case of the Skripals, investigators determined the nerve agent was most likely sprayed on their front door, and also linked it to the of a local woman who spritzed herself with a bottle of perfume discarded nearby. Years later, it is still not clear exactly how Novichok entered Mr. Navalny's system, but the possibilities range from a bad cup of tea or a dodgy cocktail to interference with his underwear. Former Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia both recovered after the attempt on their lives. It sounds fearsome, but many of the assassins are inept. The chemical assassinations may conjure up images of highly spies slipping into countries undetected to carry out their dastardly plots. But in many cases, the agents behind them have been bumbling and incompetent. Mr. Litvinenko's alleged assailants, Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun, arrived in London dressed in shimmery polyester suits, with chunky jewelry, in an apparent attempt to look like businessmen. "Are you guys from the KGB?" a fellow hotel guest joked when she ran into the men in the elevator. Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun are accused of carrying out the attempted assassination of Alexander Litvinenko. They made 2 failed attempts to poison their target by lacing tea and sushi with polonium. While they ambled around London waiting for another opportunity to strike, they left a trail of the highly radioactive substance all over the city, including in a hookah bar and an erotic nightclub. Lugovoy and Kovtun, it would become apparent, had no idea what they were carrying, journalist Luke Harding wrote in his book A Very Expensive Poison. Their behavior in Britain was idiotic, verging on suicidal. After their 3rd attempt to poison Mr. Litvinenko with a pot of green tea was successful, they tipped the rest of the polonium down their hotel room sink and mopped up some spills with towels. Another assassination attempt, this time on former Kremlin agent Skripal, was so bungled that ex-Soviet spy Viktor Suvorov concluded Russian intelligence services had descended into idiotism. The alleged assassins were repeatedly captured on CCTV as they moved through Salisbury, leaving traces of Novichok all over the city. Ruslan Boshirov and Alexander Petrov, accused of poisoning the Skripals, were captured on CCTV all around Salisbury. There was a chain of stupidity. In my time this would not have been possible. Such idiots, decried Mr. Suvorov. The plot to poison Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny in 2020 also appears to have gone awry. Mr. Navalny fell gravely ill and lapsed into a coma after he was poisoned by what experts believe was Novichok. However, the outcome may have been fatal if not for the assassin's attempt to poison him with a divisive cocktail. Mr. Navalny, who has long been a fierce critic of Vladimir Putin, started to feel ill on a flight from Tomsk in Siberia back to Moscow. Mr. Navalny told Bellingcat investigators that the night before he fell ill, he went to a bar and ordered a Bloody Mary. The bartender surprised him by saying they didn't have the necessary ingredients and offered a Negroni cocktail instead, Bellingcat wrote in their report. Navalny accepted the suggestion, but told us he couldn't take more than 1 sip, as the cocktail tasted like the most disgusting thing I've had in my life. Bellingcat could not conclude whether it was Campari or a nerve agent that repulsed him, but his aversion to the bitter taste may have saved his life. 1 sip would not have been enough to him. And in yet another twist, Mr. Navalny later duped one of the men involved in the plot to him into confessing over the phone. The Russian spy, believing he was talking to a colleague instead of his target, said agents had broken into Mr. Navalny's hotel room and sprayed Novichok into a pair of his underpants. Mr. Navalny has never figured out exactly how he was poisoned, whether it was through his jarks, or a bad cocktail, or both. But he has since made a full recovery from his brush with Novichok, and continues to be an outspoken critic of President Vladimir Putin. He'll go down in history as nothing but a poisoner, he said last year. We all remember Alexander the Liberator. Well, now we'll have Vladimir the Underpants Poisoner. What's the strategy behind poisoning people? Given the risks involved in pulling off a successful poisoning, it may seem a strange choice for Mr. Putin, especially when ruthless, trained are just a phone call away. During the Second Chechen War, FSB agents assassinated a number of opponents using the more conventional